Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your February 5th Land Board meeting. Given the snow that's out there, I hope everybody traveled safely and as you head home, the same. So, Director Walker, why don't you take it away with the consent agenda, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Governor, and good morning, members of the board. And I was kind of hoping we might have a big snow of 69 because Deputy Secretary Cummings and I, turns out we're the same age and totally remember the big snow of 69 when I lived in Eugene. But alas, it's just a dusting. So I'll move forward onto the consent agenda as you requested. The first thing up, the first item is a request for approval of the minutes of the December 18, 2018 Land Board meeting, and those are in your packets and you've all seen those previously.
The chair moves approval of the minutes of the December 18th, 2018 State Land Board meeting. Hearing and seeing no objection, so ordered.
Great. The second item is one of those ODOT bridge easements. I think we're going to see those every time because ODOT's been very, very busy. This time I have no complaints about where they're going because they're going to finally fix that bridge on Highway 38 near Scottsburg. So the issue is whether the State Land Board should approve a request from the Oregon Department of Transportation for a permanent easement to build, operate, and maintain a replacement bridge crossing the Umpqua River by State Highway 38 near Scottsburg. The authorities are set out there for you. The department circulated the application for a 30-day public comment period, and we received 2 comments. One from the Coquel Indian Tribe, just asking us to adhere to state guidelines to make sure if we find ancestral remains that they are, if they are observed or discovered, we follow those protocols, which we do. And then ODFW, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, was concerned about the seasonal timing of in-water work. Under its own authority, Douglas County conducted a technical review and floodway analysis for the bridge replacement project, and I think we're fine. ODOT is looking to replace this bridge that was constructed in 1929 when there were really tiny, skinny cars and trucks. The bridge has very narrow lanes, tight corners at both ends, and it certainly was not designed for modern traffic, and it scares me every time I travel to Reedsport and back. The replacement bridge will more likely withstand an earthquake or other natural disaster. We, the department, intend to grant a temporary easement for the removal of the existing bridge and construction of the replacement bridge. The proposed easement is 100 feet wide on either side of the center line of the proposed replacement bridge. It will allow ODOT to operate and maintain the replacement bridge. And of course, according to the Oregon administrative rules, there's no money that will be requested for this easement. Therefore, the Department of State Lands recommends that the State Land Board approve the grant of a permanent easement to operate and maintain a replacement bridge across the Umpqua River as requested by the Oregon Department of Transportation in application 61398-EA. And I will alert the audience that the new bridge is currently in the design phase. I looked it up last night. It's going out to bid in May 2019. Construction will begin in the summer or the fall of 2019, and it is a 3-year project. So if you can go through Florence on your way to the coast, you might want to do that for the delays. But I'm just so excited, and so is every other coastie.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Director Walker. Treasurer Reed.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the recommendation and of the granting of a permanent easement.
Treasurer Reed moves approval of the recommendation and the granting of the easement. Hearing and seeing no objection, so ordered.
Thank you. We'll move on to our action items. The Port of Port Orford potential land sale. Here we have a request for approval to sell 2 tracts of filled land, and I'm going to state where they are so we get those in the record. At Township 33 South, Range 15 West, Section 5, Tax Lot 200, totaling 1.66 acres of state-owned filled lands in Curry County at Graveyard Point to the adjacent riparian property owner, the Port of Port Orford. The authorities are set out below, and I'll give you a brief history lesson on Graveyard Point in a few moments. In 1999, the Port of Port Orford received a permit under application number 20291-RF to fill lands for the purpose of construction and expansion of a dock, because their existing structure was rapidly deteriorating and in need of constant repair. The structure at that time was pile supported, and the permit allowed for 100,000 cubic yards of fill to be placed over state-owned submerged and submersible land for the replacement and extension of the old structure. The port completed that dock expansion project, but they didn't pursue purchasing the new lands within the first year of creation as allowed by the statute. The port had a waterway lease, which then was going to expire in 2015, and they were advised that should they want to go forward, they would need a special use lease to now, because the dock was no longer over open water, but now it was over state-owned filled land. So that triggered a new kind of lease. At this time, we asked the port if they'd like to purchase the filled land as an alternative to leasing it. Subsequently, the port submitted an application to do so, and on October 11, 2016, the State Land Board voted to approve initial due diligence of the 2 new tracts of new lands. When that application was submitted, of course, GIS measurements were different because it hadn't been surveyed. So once it was properly surveyed, it was dropped from 1.96 acres to 1.66, which is what we're proposing to sell today. The expanded dock area has a large public parking area, an area for divers to access the water. It's a very popular diving location in Oregon, a crab fishing area for recreation, and a crane for uploading commercial fishing vessels. And if you've never been to Port Orford, the Port of Port Orford, they actually lift the boats out of the water by crane. It's one of the few ports in the country that remove boats that way, because there's no other place to bring a ship in. It's quite interesting. Before I get to the recommendation, I want to give you the history lesson. I had to reach out to my good friend and fellow Reedsport High School graduate, Carrie Timchuk, Executive Director at Oregon Historical Society, because somewhere in the remodel of my house, I've lost my copy of Oregon Geographic Names by Lewis A. MacArthur, which is just an absolute outstanding book. Everyone should have it on their bookshelf. So I emailed Carrie and I said, there's got to be an origin to the name Graveyard Point. So here's your history lesson for the day. The point is a high headland southwest of the town of Port Orford, extending southeastward into the harbor. During the time the military garrison was maintained at Port Orford, 2 soldiers were buried on this point. Thereafter, the old-timers always spoke of the headland as Graveyard Point. No other burials have ever been made there. And Carrie noted, by the way, your favorite teacher, my mother, grew up in Port Orford. So Carrie's mother was a teacher, Marlene Timchuk, and she was actually my husband's teacher because he's 6 years older than me. And I didn't go to elementary school there. But anyway, that's your history lesson. I love it. My recommendation from the department is that we recommend that the land board authorize the direct sale of the 2 tracts of new lands totaling 1.66 acres in Curry County to the Port of Port Orford for $12,130, which is the appraised value.
Any discussion? Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the recommendation and authorization of the sale.
The treasurer moves approval of the staff recommendation and authorization of the sale. Hearing and seeing no objection, the motion carries.
Great. We'll move on to point number 4. I'm going to ask Bill Ryan, our deputy, to behind me to join us because I think there's going to be a question or two. Agenda item 4 is request for approval to initiate due diligence and partition on the surface and subsurface mineral rights of the south portion of the South Tongue Point property. We also are asking you to authorize the sale of the north portion of the property in Astoria through a direct sale to Clatsop Community College and authorize the initial due diligence, as I mentioned, and partition of the southern portion of the property. The authorities are set out below, so let me give you the background. The South Tongue Point property is on the deep water channel of the Columbia River at the eastern end of Astoria. Some of the northern portion of the property has been leased to the Clatsop Community College for its MERTS College campus, and MERTS stands for Marine and Environmental Research and Training Station. They've had an annual land lease from us for $13,848. The east side of that same property has a dock and a small office owned by the U.S. Coast Guard. Salmon net pens next to the dock are leased to the Clatsop County Economic Development Council. So it looks like we're doing a lot of economic development on that piece of property. The land was enlarged with dredge spoils from 1948 to 1976 from the Columbia River, and DSL acquired the land from the federal government in 1980, both the north and the south Tongue Point property for $2 million. So there's two, the north and the south. Most of the property is zoned marine industrial, which supports water-related industrial uses. The southern portion of the property has never been developed except for 8.5 acres as a wetland restoration area. We received an application from Warrenton Fiber Company in 2013 to purchase the southern portion of the property with the intent of creating an expansion area for its fiberwood products production and shipping. The land board approved due diligence on that at its February 11, 2014 meeting. But in completing the due diligence, DSL sent out notice to the property owners and we got feedback. We got feedback from the Columbia River Estuary Study Task Force, which had performed the wetland restoration in 2012 to enhance salmon habitat. They wrote a letter to DSL urging us not to sell the wetland restoration area. Other comments received from residents expressed concern about safety, the highway access, as well as concern over development of a site as an industrial property. So therefore, DSL rejected the application. At its October 13, 2015 meeting, the Land Board approved due diligence on the entire South Tongue Point property because of a land sale application from Clatsop Community College. The college was not only concerned with the possibility of a large industrial site being located across from its MERTS campus, but it also saw an opportunity to expand its marine environmental education program with a living laboratory in the southern undeveloped portion of the property. That brings us to 2016. The college requested that the transaction be split into two transactions, with the north campus purchased first, with a partition from the south undeveloped property and from the north tidelands. The college has been working with the Columbia Land Trust to purchase the southern undeveloped property. Because of potential grant requirements, the southern parcel would be purchased with surface and subsurface mineral or property rights. And the Columbia Land Trust has submitted their application for the southern property in June of 2018 on behalf of the college and has received some preliminary approvals for grant funding. The northern property partition has been approved by the City of Astoria, and a second partition will be completed this year to separate the southern tidelands. All of the tidelands will be retained by DSL. The north property was recently appraised by Matthew Larrabee for $826,500, which was accepted by the Clatsop Community College's board. Therefore, the department recommends that the State Land Board authorize the direct sale of the north portion of the South Tongue Point property, a 21.78 acre parcel located at Township 8N, Range 9W, Section 12, Tax Lot 102 in Clatsop County to Clatsop Community College for $826,500. In addition, we would like the board to authorize the department to initiate due diligence studies and partition of the southern portion of the property located at Township 8N, Range 9W, Section 12 and 13, Tax Lot 106, lying south of Liberty Lane. There's a lot of explanation, but it was a little confusing with the north and the south and the splitting of the properties. But there's also in your packet, Exhibit A, will show you a visual, which I'm a big visual person. And then Exhibit B is the land evaluation form. So, and Exhibit C is the Land Board direction from 2015.
Thank you.
Sure.
Director Walker, could you talk a little bit about, or someone from the agency talk a little bit about, the property was purchased in 1980 for $2 million. We're selling a portion of it for less than half of it. This clearly was not a spectacular investment. But I'd love to hear a sense of the valuation of the property, why it's so low at this point in time.
Okay, and that's why Deputy Bill Ryan is here to address that.
Yes, good morning, Governor Brown, members of the board. For the record, I'm Deputy Director Bill Ryan, Department of State Lands. The sale that we're looking at here is a small portion of the total property that was acquired for $2 million. So it was both portions of North Tongue Point and South Tongue Point that were acquired by the department back in 1980. And so the $826,000 evaluation is for that tax lot number 102 that is being sold to the community college. The southern tax lot 106, which is going to be purchased by the land trust, will have another value to it. It is fairly low value property because it is, wetlands and habitat. Pretty challenging to get authorization to grade that and then fill it. And so probably the best use for that property is as a natural open space and laboratory really for the college there for environmental studies.
Great, thank you. Other questions, other concerns?
Madam
Treasurer
Chair,
Reed.
Thank you. Deputy Director, I think you just answered my question, but it sounds like the Land Trust's intention is to use it as a laboratory. Is there anything more to add about the relationship between the trust and the college?
I think it's really just a creative funding way for the college to end up with those environmental resource lands, and so the land trust is using grant monies to obtain the property, and I believe their intent is to eventually give it to the community college.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
So, while I really appreciate Clatsop County's college's important work, I'm uncertain that this transaction fulfills the land board's fiduciary duty, as we do appear to be poised to lose a substantial amount of money, as the wetlands obviously are not the high value of the property.
So the value of the property is what it is. That $2 million investment did include North Tongue Point, and that not being part of the transaction here, I don't have an evaluation for what that northern portion is. That's something that we can follow up with and get a sense of what the estimated value is of the total acquisition that was acquired back in 1980 to get a sense of that. That will help, because that is a reasonable ask.
Thank you.
Thank you. Treasurer Reed.
Madam Chair, move approval of the recommendation and the plan for the language.
Treasurer Reed moves approval of that the State Land Board, the staff recommendation of the State Land Board authorize the direct sale of the north portion of the South Tongue Point property, a 21.78 acre parcel located at the information set forth in Clatsop County to Clatsop Community College, and authorize the department to initiate due diligence studies and partition of the southern portion of the property located in Clatsop County as well. I hear a concern from the Secretary of State's office. We will note that for the record and make sure that the agency gets back to us on the full evaluation of the entire property. But hearing and seeing no objection to the motion, it is so ordered.
Thanks, Bill. Ready for item 5?
Yep.
All right, item 5. I was up late last night. We finalized our memorandum of understanding late last evening, because both our counsel, Matt DeVore, and I were working late. We had received final edits from Oregon State University on what they'd like the memo to say. They did not think we were going to complete our review this morning, so the dean is off doing other things this morning, and I couldn't capture his signature. But we are prepared to sign this document today. So let me explain what this is all about, because we've spent a lot of time on it. So in December, the Land Board directed the department to work with Oregon State University to develop a plan for transforming the Elliott State Forest into a research forest. Today, I'm very pleased to report on the progress we've made, because we have not sat idle since December. In the weeks since the last Land Board meeting, DSL and OSU have met multiple times for several hours at each time to set out a path that will have a plan before you in December 2019. Those meetings have included 2 multi-hour sessions where DSL and OSU rolled up their sleeves along with our contractor and Oregon Consensus, our contractor doing the HCP-ICF. That's a lot of acronyms there, but ICF is an acronym in and of itself, with a habitat conservation plan. We needed to figure out what we're going to do in coming months to move forward to meet our December deadline. Our meetings and all the hard work of parties and council has resulted in this memorandum of understanding before you today as our first step. As I indicated, we reached terms last evening. I spoke with Jeff Huntington this morning, and we'll have this signed and in your inboxes today. The MOU you see before you provides a framework for DSL and OSU to develop this plan. This plan to establish an Elliott State Research Forest that will be decoupled from the Common School Fund. So let me take you through that, since this is the first time the audience and both listening and present and you all have seen this, though I've sent you drafts previously. I think most of the changes were stylistic when lawyers look things over, and I worked with lawyers for 25 years as a court reporter. They all like to add their stylistic changes, and I don't think that's just a lawyer. I think legislators like that too. So most of us like to have the last final, I think I'd like it to say this. So this is what it is. We're happy, we're excited, and let me take you through it. So the memo states the purpose, which is certainly to provide the framework for the collaboration between the parties. We state who the parties are and what the purpose is, and it is to establish the Elliott State Research Forest. And I'm going to go through the background to bring folks up to date. In May 2017, the board voted to keep Elliott State Forest in public ownership. Y'all directed the department to move forward with a public process for public ownership. And in December of 2018, just a few months ago, the board unanimously directed the department to work with the university to develop that plan. Board members also noted these key points: that we needed to involve tribes, local governments, and other state agencies and key stakeholders in the development of that plan. You also at that time approved a declaration to implement the statute enacted by the legislature in 2017 that provides that $100 million in bonding to decouple the Elliott State Forest from the Common School Fund or compensate the fund for preservation of non-economic benefits. That transfer is scheduled to take place next month. Council, am I correct?
Certificates of participation?
Yes.
Late February, early March is the process.
Okay, great, thank you. And the parties understand, and I want to make this clear, the university is neither capable of nor interested in assuming debt service obligations of $120.8 million, which is the remainder of the appraised value of $220.8 million. This memo does not obligate the university to purchase but to undertake the work outlined in the agreement. They're not committing to continued participation beyond 2019, but in the memorandum and subsequent agreements, we will be looking at funding sources to assist the university. The university will exercise good faith efforts to develop a plan in collaboration. And this memo captures the board's overall direction to date regarding the Elliott, as stated in this memo, keeping it public, or at least public access, to decouple the forest from the Common School Fund, to continue habitat conservation planning, to protect species and allow for harvest. And in fact, Jeff Huntington with the university is meeting today at this moment with our habitat conservation plan contractors to go over details, because they will become very much involved in that process now. And we are to maintain a working forest that provides local and community benefits. And we have collectively called that the board vision. It's a good vision, we like it, and we're sticking to it. We are going to examine different mechanisms for structuring the ownership and the management consistent with that vision. And this is where the revenue sources and funding mechanisms will be examined. There was discussion about trust lands. We are working through all of the options with the university over the next several months. The parties also agree that generating timber harvest revenue sufficient to support the forest and contribute to local economies is an important component of the plan. Assessment of timber harvest scenarios in relation to the HCP options and other public values will be accomplished as part of preparing the plan. Additional community partnerships will be investigated through extensive engagement with diverse groups and entities interested in the future of the Elliott State Forest. And for instance, just before the meeting started, Bob Van Dyke of Wild Salmon Center introduced himself, and I said, I need to talk to you. And he gave me his card. I'll be making the outreach to the various interest groups on all sides to see how they would like to participate in the advisory process. So we have begun that conversation, and we have begun working with tribal nations as well. The plan at a high level is going to include a timeline for submitting the HCP. We're going to have to adjust that timeline. We're trying to smush things up. Smush is a technical word. We're trying to tighten it up so that we do what we need to do with all due dispatch. I recall the governor saying that, and other members. We are getting that engagement process honed down. We spent a lot of time working on how we're going to develop that. We want to include recreation access, conservation, and a number of other things. We will also protect key conservation values collectively using a number of different mechanisms, not solely limited to the HCP. We're looking at a carbon sequestration program, and there will be much work done on that. a forest management plan with specified harvest practices that incorporates ecological forestry principles, and potential establishment of funded conservation easements. So there's a big plate of work to do here. We are interested as a collaborative group here to establish a vision as to how the Elliott State Research Forest can be part of a university research program. So there's a lot of conversation going on at the university level as well as with interested stakeholders. We have developed partner commitments. We spent a lot of time on this. We have the duties of the department are outlined here. I'm not going to go through all those. People can read them. You can read them. The university has duties as well. We're all going to be held to meeting these expectations. And then we likewise have shared duties. And our shared commitments as partners include making sure that we coordinate and share responsibility for transparent and open communications with the media and the public on matters associated with development of the plan. We will not be operating in the darkness. I don't believe in that. You don't believe in that, and Oregon State government does not believe in that. So there will be a great deal of opportunity for the public to be involved. We agree to share and coordinate all information, data, and modeling results and expertise between the two partners. And we will agree on the outreach to engage tribal governments in the planning discussion. We will also coordinate our investigation of potential legal mechanisms to accomplish the decoupling from the Common School Fund, and that is not intended to imply or require waiver of attorney-client privilege available to either the department or the university. The rest of that information is all administrative about how we're going to manage things. So in summary, I just want to say that by the next land board meeting, which is in April, we will have started to work to develop the plan. We anticipate our progress report in April will include an overview of the work needed and the timeline necessary to develop the plan. That our efforts to ensure a transparent planning process and engage stakeholders has begun, and that we will have formed an advisory group and other methods of succeeding on making sure this happens. So there's a lot of work to be done in the next 2 months. Folks out there listening can expect to receive a phone call from me asking interest in serving on an advisory group. I haven't yet decided how to approach that. I've been thinking strongly about asking for submittal of interest forms that people often do with executive appointments through your office, Governor. And then we will have a group of folks that will sift through those and narrow them down to a manageable group of 15 to 20 people for an advisory group. So that, at this point, that's where I've landed, but I'm still open to talking about that. So that is the end of my report on the Elliott and the update. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Secretary, Director Walker. Deputy Secretary Cummings, any questions or comments?
Yes, Director Walker, I'd just like to know if the intergovernmental agreement that the department's going to be, will they be bringing it to the committee before it's executed?
I don't know the answer to that, and Deputy Director Secretary is talking about the intergovernmental agreement that we are working on with Oregon State University. That is not ready for prime time yet. We're still working out the nuances of that. Oregon State has asked for some assistance in working through the plan, and so we are looking at what that financial assistance will entail. How broadly we circulate that yet, I don't have an answer for you. That's still our inner core group has been working on that issue.
Okay, thank you.
Director Walker, as I read in the memorandum of understanding, it's fairly clear that the university is neither capable or interested in assuming debt service obligations for the full $120 million. I'm interested to know whether you or Treasurer Reed has had any conversations with the university about assuming a different level of obligation in terms of the debt, like a lower amount.
I'll let Treasurer Reed answer that one first.
Madam Chair, Governor, I think it is safe to say at this point that we're continuing to have discussions about what options are there. I wouldn't want to speak for the university beyond that, but I think we're all really clear on the land board's intent to make sure that the Common School Fund is fully compensated and that we're fully decoupled at the end. So my summary would be to say that all of those options are out there, that we're continuing to talk about ways that we can do that in a way that meets their constraints and their resources. I suspect that there's probably some capacity for timber-backed revenue bonds. That level I don't think is clear yet.
Okay, all right, thank you. Anybody, any other comments? Treasurer Reed?
Madam Chair, I just want to say thank you to the department and the university. I think this is really promising progress, a lot of specifics, a lot of good work to detail what is yet to come, to narrow in on the questions and to identify the ways that the department and the university are going to work together. I continue to think this is a really encouraging path for us to be on, and I hope you'll convey my thanks to to your team and to the university as well. And we'll look forward to what's next.
Thank you, Governor and Treasurer Reed. And I would be remiss if I did not thank my competent staff. Robert Underwood joined us from the Department of Administrative Services. He's our project manager. Robert, are you in the room? He's not in the room right now, but and Malia Masiba came to us from Representative Caddy McEwen's office, and I immediately tasked her with the Elliott. And my fiscal staff, they have just been fabulous to work with, and Jeff Huntington is driven. This is his project for this year. He's no longer chief of staff over at Department of Forestry because that transition is complete and they have a new dean, and he's 100% committed to this project. He's terrific to work with. And I can't say enough about our counsel, Matt DeVore. He gets back to me within seconds sometimes, so I wonder if he has a plug in his ear that, oh, Vicki has pinged you on email. But last night I left the office at 8 and went home and fixed a very quick dinner and sat down to look at my email to work some more, and Matt had already looked at what I had sent him, the MOU, and said, I'm fine with it. So I'm tickled pink. The only thing I'm not tickled about is that I don't have this signed, but it will be signed today. But we were driven to get this to you today to show you how committed we are to fulfilling the board vision. And I hope that we've shown that to you today.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? We'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you all for your very diligent and dedicated work on this project that continues to keep moving forward. Thank you.
You're welcome. For agenda item 6, I'll bring Bill Ryan back up to the table, and he'll walk you through this very fabulous, well-structured report that our staff has put together. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Bill.
Morning, Governor Brown, members of the board. For the record, Bill Ryan, Deputy Director, Oregon Department of State Lands. So this is the annual Aquatic Resource Management Program reporting. So for fiscal year 2018, this report provides information regarding management of state-owned waterways and also fulfills the reporting requirement of the state's removal fill law. This report covers fiscal year 2018, and I'm going to just provide some highlights. The full report is in your packet. For state-owned waterways, the Department's Aquatic Resource Management Program manages the state-owned land or the state-owned lands underlying all navigable and tidally influenced waterways that were granted to the state at statehood. And so we've managed those to protect the public trust values of commerce, navigation, fishing, and recreation. We manage nearly 6,000 active proprietary authorizations. On average, we issue 131 new authorizations a year and renew about 542 existing authorizations. That's been an average over the past 4 or 5 years. And in fiscal year 2018, state-owned waterways generated $3.1 million in revenue. I want to highlight a couple major efforts in 2018. The last year when I provided this this report, we were in the middle of the global site cleanup. The cleanup was completed in August of 2018 with the removal and demolition of the River Queen. The total cost of the cleanup was approximately $12 million. And the department is working to reduce the risk of similar situations occurring in the future. We've updated our leasehold inspection protocols. We're looking at options such as better insurance coverage and also increased bonding for lessees over the waterways. There is some draft legislation in play right now, House Bill 2272, that would allow the department to charge a surcharge on leases in order to do better insurance or to otherwise offset cleanup costs. The Submerged Lands Enhancement Fund was created by the legislature in 2017. The department developed rules for implementation of a grant program to distribute funds for cleanup of submerged and submersible lands that are managed and owned by the department. We have budgeted $100,000 per biennium for that, so we had our first grant cycle last year. We issued 3 grants for 3 projects for invasive aquatic plant management by Willamette River Keeper, removal and replacement of a public dock structure for the city of Coquille, and removal of small-scale debris by the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership in the Columbia River. We're also continuing to work on the issue of transient boaters. As the board is aware, the past several years has been an increase in the number of people living on boats in the Willamette and Columbia Rivers in Portland without authorization. This is problematic for multiple reasons. Living conditions are unsafe, access by emergency services is difficult, and many of the vessels don't have power, and so it's difficult to move them if they need to be moved for safety reasons. There's a higher risk of pollution from sewage, oil slicks, and other wastes. Many of the vessels do not have onboard sanitation. That's a problem as well. And many of the vessels are in disrepair and end up becoming abandoned and derelict and can be sunk and basically have to be retrieved and removed and disposed of. So DSL formed the Transient Boater Work Group in 2014 and has been working with that multiple stakeholder group to address the issue. It's comprised of 18 stakeholder organizations which are listed in the report. They include state agencies, Multnomah County and City of Portland departments, boating organizations, and JOIN, which is a nonprofit organization that works to help people transition from homelessness to permanent housing. So we're working in partnership with that working group to clear the waterways using a progressive enforcement approach. In fiscal year 2018, the department seized and disposed of 13 vessels in partnership with the Oregon State Marine Board. We share the disposal costs with the Marine Board. And the department continues to lead that transient boater work group to address the issue.
I just have to say thank you. I tend to call Director Walker every time I'm reminded of boats in the Willamette River that have been around for a long period of time, and I appreciate the responsive action that the department takes on this issue.
And Governor, I want to add to that too, because we had a meeting this week. There was a news story, television news story done recently, and I got quite a few emails about that. And so we met this week. It was the first time we've all been able to get together to discuss what is our action plan for 2019, because it has become an enormous problem. I went out last summer with Allie Ryan Hansen, our public affairs person, and actually I'm remiss because I didn't thank Allie for all her work on the Elliott. She's tied to my hip, so I often think of Allie as part of me, but she's expecting a baby soon, so she's got her own extra lives to worry about. But Allie has been tremendous at helping us focus not only on the Elliott, but on this issue with the transient boaters. So we are looking at taking the funding from that Submerged Land Enhancement Fund this year and really focusing it on trying to dispose of these transient and derelict vessels. They have become flotillas. I mean, you can go on the Columbia and the Willamette and see 3 or 4 or 5 boats and sheds.
With docks attached and
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just become untenable, and the residents in the nearby marinas are quite frustrated, and I don't blame them. So we have some really good dedicated work from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. They are right there with us. Ross Island Sand and Gravel has been a significantly good partner at helping us target those folks that run away from DSL and go hide out at the private area owned by Ross Island Sand and Gravel, and they have become a tremendous partner. So we are really going to make 2019 the year that we can make a bigger dent. We've done a lot, but we've got to make a bigger dent.
Great, thank you.
Okay, turn it back over to you.
Okay, so moving on to the removal fill report portion of the report. DSL also protects the state's wetlands and waterways through administration of Oregon's removal fill law, which was enacted in 1967. The removal fill law was passed to ensure protection and the best use of Oregon's water resources for wildlife habitat, public navigation, fishing, commercial, and recreational uses. Permit volumes have continued to increase. During the reporting period, the department received 436 permit applications, and that's a 30% increase from 2017. The department approved 502 permits during that period, so there was some holdover from the previous year as well, and 270 of the approved permits were for activity in essential anadromous salmonid habitat. For wetland determinations and delineations, the department provided 330 determinations and reviewed 332 delineations. And those are increases of 160 and 120% relative to the prior 2-year period. So I kind of average those previous 2 years. In general, our permit trends are continuing to increase. We're at pre-recession volumes. There was a big drop after 2008, and things have just been increasing, and actually the rate of increase has been increasing as well the last couple of years. So hopefully that volume of applications and workload coming into the department will plateau at some point. For compliance, the permit and compensatory mitigation compliance is strong. We only had 1 permit-related violation open in 2018. However, there still is quite a bit of unauthorized activity that occurs. That means removal fill activity that should have got a permit but didn't. And so we opened 109 enforcement files in 2018 and closed 112. So a little rollover from the previous year as well on that. We also are working on some legislation that's really not from 2018, but sort of a heads up of what's happening now. Representative Clem created a working group from the House Ag and Natural Resource Committee, which is now the House Ag and Land Use Committee. There are 3 pieces of legislation coming out of that committee. House Bill 2436, which is looking at partial assumption of the Army Corps' 404 regulations by the department. House Bill 2437, which is dealing with maintenance of agricultural drainage channels, and House Bill 2438, which has to deal with mitigation banking, is looking at a new way of approaching that in the Mid-Willamette Valley. The department is also in the process of rulemaking to roll out the aquatic resource mitigation framework. I reported on that last year as well because we were just starting the rulemaking. It's a joint effort between the EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, and DSL to develop functional assessments to basically do a better job of replacing the functions and values of wetlands and waters that are lost through development, and making sure that the compensatory mitigation that is required as a result of those losses actually replaces the functions that are lost, or is invested strategically where it doesn't make sense or it's not practicable to replace the specific functions that are lost. So it allows sort of out-of-kind replacement in a strategic way that gets better environmental outcomes in the long term. And so we're near the end of the rulemaking. We're working out some issues that were identified with our stakeholders during the rulemaking process. And I want to call out ODOT as a particularly valuable partner. They've been a really good partner with us, providing technical input and also test driving the new tools and methods for us to see kind of real world applications and what the results of those are. And we're working with them to make sure that as we roll out this rulemaking that it doesn't interfere with their ability to deliver their big transportation package. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Thank you. Deputy Secretary Cummings, any questions or comment? Thank you. Treasurer Reed?
Madam Chair, thank you. I do have one question, which is just sort of a general one. You mentioned in your presentation that you sort of made a connection between the economic trends and the level of applications and so on. I wonder if I heard that right, one, and two, if there are any surprises or trends in those levels that we ought to be paying attention to and anticipating.
Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, that I did say that. Yeah, the removal fill permit application, also wetland delineation and concurrence volumes tend to correlate with the level of economic activity. There's money available to do development projects, or money available to do maintenance and on people's private property as well. So yes, they do track that. The volumes have continued to increase. We're very efficient here. We've got a staff of about 30 folks that are part of the Aquatic Resource Management Program. I'm hoping that the volumes don't increase significantly more, because we really are pretty busy. My folks are busy. We are meeting our statutory timeframes for permit responses and for delineation concurrence reviews, but those timeframes per our KPMs are going up as a result of that workload, and so we'll continue to track that and see what's happening. What we did see is that these numbers are actually as of June of last year, and so we continued to receive high numbers of applications through the summer, which is our normal busy time. Things have slowed down, which is normal also during the winter time, but we'll see what tomorrow, what this coming year brings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the update.
All right. We will move on to item number 7, and I believe Peter Doherty with the Department of Forestry is here to talk to us today.
He is.
And I'll step back.
Good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor Brown and members of the board. For the record, I am Peter Doherty, and I serve as the Oregon State Forester and Director of the Oregon Department of Forestry. We are here to submit our annual report on the management of common school forest lands for fiscal year 2018. 2018 was the first year that the common school forest lands we managed did not include the Elliott State Forest, reducing the amount that we were managing to 33,000 acres, 33,074 acres to be exact. As you are aware, we manage these lands to maximize revenue as mandated in our Real Asset Management Plan, which is our management agreement with Department of State Lands. With this, I'll turn it over to Liz Dent, our State Forest Division Chief, for a brief summary of our accomplishments in 2018.
Thank you, Peter. Governor Brown, members of the board, for the record, my name is Liz Dent, and I serve as the State Forest Division Chief for Department of Forestry. In 2018, we harvested approximately 3.6 million board feet off of these 33,000 acres, generating roughly $2 million. The costs associated with managing these forests totaled about $1.3 million. This resulted in a net operating income of roughly $700,000. Operating costs include the planning and sale of timber sales, conducting and coordinating road easements to access these properties, scattered parcels, and contract administration associated with timber sales. Those are typical activities. Among other aspects of managing public forests, our costs also include surveys for threatened and endangered species, in this case specifically northern spotted owl and marbled murrelets. Spent about $84,000 on that in fiscal year 2018. We have 4 resident northern spotted owl sites and 1,436 acres of marbled murrelet management areas. That does not include additional buffers that are established around these marbled murrelet areas where we can do some harvesting, as opposed to the murrelet management areas themselves where there's no harvesting allowed. I would argue that these are really important contributions to conservation that are being provided from these common school forest lands. Common school forest land acreage spans 18 counties, with the majority in Klamath County of a little shy of 7,000 acres, and the least amount of acreage in Columbia and Yamhill counties of around 80 acres each in those counties. Looking to the future, we expect to harvest roughly 9.6 million board feet and anticipate that that will generate about $4.5 million with a net income of $3.2 million to the Common School Fund from fiscal year 2019.
Thank you. In closing, the division has made several business improvements over the past years, which has increased our efficiency and increased revenue while holding costs relatively flat. ODF's management of these efforts have resulted in net positive cash flow to the Common School Fund. We have done this while continuing to meet public expectations for providing clean water and high-quality habitat for native fish and wildlife, including the protection of threatened and endangered species. We anticipate another positive outcome from our 2019 operations, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Director Doherty. Thank you, Deputy Director Dent. Are there any questions or comments?
I have a comment. Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, as you know, as fiduciaries, the land board's responsibility is to manage the Common School Fund lands to maximize funding for the Oregon schools. Yet once again, returns on 33,074 miscellaneous forest lands were underwhelming. Secretary Richardson believes we need to do better and appreciates Director Walker's work to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Treasurer Reed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question that I was initially confused on some of the language, and the Deputy Director helped me understand it. I'm looking at the first page where it describes 2018 and 2019. So that 4.6 million, and you made this clear in your statement just now, is the 2018 harvest that would be reflected in 2019, if I understood you correctly. But I want to understand something about that. I think you said 4.5 when in your comment it says 4.6 here. But more interestingly, I think you also said 3.2 million would be the costs. So I'd love to know a little more about what those costs are, how much of them are fixed and how much of them are variable. If it was 1.3 on 2 revenue, how that breaks down in terms of fixed and variable elements.
So, great question. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but
Just general terms would be great. Thanks.
Classic fixed costs certainly include our surveys for threatened and endangered species, and that makes up the most significant piece of expenditures outside personal services, which would be our other fixed costs. Things that are more difficult to predict are reforestation expenses, road maintenance and construction. Those would be the two next big pieces of costs other than the fixed costs.
Okay.
And that can vary greatly from year to year. And the reason being is because when you think about the reforestation efforts that are taking place, those are from previous timber harvests. When we sell a timber sale, the contract is a 3-year contract, which is really beneficial for the department and for the purchasers. They have some certainty around revenue that they're going to be able to generate as business owners, but they also have flexibility, which allows them to make decisions around what the market conditions look like. But that puts out a 3-year contract, so these types of predictions, including costs and revenues coming in, become a little bit difficult to predict because of those 3-year contracts in part.
Interesting.
And then shifts, obviously shifts in the timber market are a huge driver for the outcomes here.
That would make sense in terms of the revenue, but in terms of the fixed costs, so if we're expecting 4.5 or 4.6 for 2018, is there any way to guess, even directionally, in 2019, the total cost in terms of the margin? Then also sounds fairly unpredictable.
Well, I actually would say that if we look at what we're predicting in terms of the revenue that would come in and the net income for the Common School Fund, we're looking at a fairly flat expenditure for the fiscal year.
For 4.6 versus and 3.2?
So the total expenditures for 18 being 1.3.
Right.
And potentially, so looking to the upcoming year, generating 4.5, with a net income of 3.2.
I misunderstood you. You said 3.2 on the net income, not
Apologies.
the
Sorry about
cost.
that.
I may have misunderstood you. That clears a lot up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I had to do a little scribble here on my math to make sure I was tracking, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we're predicting costs to be relatively flat.
That helps a lot. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Appreciate your time and energy.
Members of the board and Madam Chair, I did want to indicate I appreciate Oregon Department of Forestry's work, but I did want to give you an update that we did hire a forester. It took us a while to find just the right person, but we did hire Ryan Singleton. He has recently received silvicultural information from the Oregon Department of Forestry on all of our certified Common School Fund forest lands. He said it will take him roughly 6 months to go through all the site information, which will require some time in the field as well, and most likely closer to a year to evaluate everything in order to make any recommendations regarding sale of property or future forest management related decisions. So this is following up on the good work we had done by our intern this summer that identified all the property owners of our certified and non-certified, or our lands, all of our lands, so that we could take a look at maybe engaging in trades or selling land and finding a way to better manage what we have. So I just wanted to provide you with that update.
That would be great. I think then I won't ask for a 6-month update, but probably a year update, unless you want to do a 6 months, here's where we're at, and come back in February of next year.
Yeah, I think I can do that. I'd be happy to do a 6-month update. And Ryan comes to us, his most recent work has been with the Warm Springs. And he's excellent. I've met with him already, very bright and talented, and knows his way around a tree and a forest. So I'm very excited about it. All right. If Governor, you like me to go forward, we'll move on to item 8.
Let's move on to 8.
And I'll invite, thank you, Peter and Liz. I'll invite Bree Yednock up to the table. Bree is the manager of the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve. And I asked Bree, we're going to talk about 2 things with regard to how we nickname it. It's also called just the South Slough. So we're going to talk about 2 things here under item 8 today. Bree's going to talk about the work that the South Slough, the reserve, does on climate change. This is a big issue for everyone. It's an issue for you, Governor. It's been very clear in your State of the State address, and the legislature and all of you, I think, are concerned as every Oregonian about climate change. So I thought, since we have the reserve under our wing and we support the reserve financially, that we need to hear about the good work they do on that. Then I also will give you an update about where we are in the looking for alternative management or alternative funding sources. And then that will take us to the end of that presentation. So I will turn it over to Bree.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Governor, members of the board, for the record, my name is Bree Yednock. I'm the Reserve Manager at the South Slough Reserve in Charleston, Oregon. I'd like to thank you all and Director Walker for this opportunity to come and speak for you about the great work that our staff are doing at the South Slough Reserve related to climate change. As I'm sure you're well aware, climate change presents a significant threat to the Oregon coast. Sea level rise, extreme weather events, and ocean acidification are all aspects of climate change that threaten our coastal infrastructure, our natural ecosystems, our coastal economies, and human safety. The South Slough Reserve identifies climate change as a management priority in our current 5-year management plan, and so our talented and hardworking staff are engaged in several research and education efforts related to climate change issues. With respect to sea level rise, our reserve participates in the National Estuarine Research Reserve System Sentinel Sites program. As a Sentinel site, our science staff maintain the necessary infrastructure within our estuary to understand how wetlands will fare in the face of sea level rise. The plan outlining this work has been praised by our partners at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and shared across the reserve system as a gold standard example. Our staff are also mapping the distribution of wetlands and upland habitats within our watershed to provide essential baseline data for assessing habitat changes over time. And this work is being used to inform mapping protocols for use across the state of Oregon. With respect to ocean acidification, the reserve maintains equipment in South Slough to measure pH and dissolved carbon dioxide, which are two key parameters for understanding acidification patterns. Our science staff are also working with researchers at Oregon State University to assess impacts of changing pH on macroalgae and eelgrass beds, which provide critical estuary habitat for fish and shellfish. Another area of our reserve's work is related to blue carbon. And blue carbon refers to carbon that is stored and sequestered in coastal ecosystems that would otherwise be released into the atmosphere and contribute to increasing carbon dioxide levels. The reserve helped create and continues to be a part of the Pacific Northwest Blue Carbon Working Group. With this group, the reserve staff are working to measure the amount of blue carbon that is stored in tidal wetlands across Oregon as well as the Pacific Northwest, and to understand how carbon storage in wetlands changes as those wetland habitats are converted to alternative uses. This work was highlighted at the Legislative Carbon Reduction Committee meeting in July of last year. So I've highlighted some of the research that we are doing related to climate change, but perhaps the most important part of our work is sharing what we're learning. So our education staff incorporate climate change issues into our school programs, our volunteer trainings, community education, public outreach, and teacher trainings. For example, our research and education staff recently partnered with the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development on a community education event in the Coos Bay area that included a presentation on the effects of sea level rise on the Oregon coast, as well as a King Tides photo sharing event to help the community visualize what increasing sea levels will look like. Our education coordinator is currently, right now, at this moment, busy preparing a teacher training workshop on ocean acidification and sea level rise that will be delivered at our reserve next weekend. This workshop will give teachers information and resources for using scientific data to investigate climate change issues in the classroom with their students. Finally, the Coastal Training Program based at our reserve provides training to increase the use of science-based information by coastal managers and decision makers. Audiences for our program include coastal decision makers, planners, geographic data users, and managers working for local, state, and federal agencies and native sovereign nations. Recent workshops by our training program focused on climate adaptation for coastal communities and mapping of estuarine wetlands and sea level rise, inundation in coastal areas. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for the opportunity to highlight the important work that our incredibly talented and dedicated staff are doing. You've all received memos with your meeting materials that provides more details, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Bree, and we appreciate your really terrific work. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the Pacific Northwest Blue Carbon Working Group. Specifically, we have partnered through the Pacific Coast Collaborative with California to British Columbia around ocean acidification. I'm curious, how far north are you going? Are you including British Columbia in that work, and who all is participating?
So we are participating in the group, but it's primarily being coordinated by Craig Cornu at the Applied Institute for Ecology. And he was a former staff member at the South Slough Reserve and started it while he was there. So he has compiled a group across the Northwest into Canada as well as across the country for policy experts related to blue carbon and market assessment to see if blue carbon, could be a potential market.
Fabulous, thank you. Other questions or comments? Thank you very much. Appreciate you driving up to join us. I hope you came up last night as opposed to this morning.
I did.
Good, okay.
And you just stay put if you can. Yeah, she sent me a note and said, could I have permission to drive up Monday night? Absolutely. I just wanted you to hear about this great work. And as Bree told me one time, she says she's a biologist, and she certainly is a trained biologist and understands the workings of what's going on there. What she wasn't prepared for was all of the work involved in looking at alternative management and funding options for the South Slough. And it's incredible the work that she's been doing. So, I mean, I thought I was going to have to do it all, but she is out there and calling people and arranging meetings, and is tremendous. So let me give you an update, because that was one of my charges when I was hired. So I'm just going to give you, there's a memo in your file. I'll give you a little history lesson. I love history, as you know. In Oregon, the legislature established the South Slough Reserve through legislation, and the audience might like to know, ORS 273.553, and there you can find all of the relevant statutes. It also, at that time, designated the Department of State Lands as the administering agency for the reserve. So our great legislature felt that the great Department of State Lands could handle this work. They being the legislature, also created the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve Management Commission, of which I chair by virtue of being the director here. And it is comprised of 9 governor-appointed members, and which includes 1 tribal seat, and serves as the reserve's governing and policy-making board. The reserve's operating funds, as you know, come from NOAA and from us, the Department of State Lands. And as I mentioned, I believe in December, the percentage of grant funds versus DSL has been dropping pretty substantially. So we're at 60% grant funds now, I believe. Lee, is that correct? And 40% DSL. So we've been pleased to see that. The reserve staff is credited for really going out there and hunting down those grants and applying for them. And in fact, you are testifying in front of Ways and Means Subcommittee on Thursday about a grant, right? Okay. All right, so then what happened? Well, early on, state funding was a mix of general fund and common school fund. It was a nice little mix. But in the 1980s, we had a statewide financial crisis, and the legislature said no more general fund. So we became solely funded, we being the South Slough Reserve, became solely funded by Department of State Lands and the Common School Fund. So the idea of moving the South Slough out of DSL has been explored many times, but the idea gained the most traction with the execution of an agreement of cooperation on April 19, 2016, that established a work group comprised of administrators from DSL, U of O, and OSU to determine the feasibility of transferring the management of the South Slough to one or both universities. Unfortunately, as I perused through the record, there were no tribal governments involved in that. There was simply a notation in their report that they are considering tribal interests and anticipate working with tribes and entering into MOUs, but they were not involved in that conversation about disconnecting, which was really a misstep in my view. Since then, we had heard that Oregon State University was no longer interested. They had their minds elsewhere on a research for us, so why would we buy a research reserve? But Bree has recently reached out to Oregon State, and they would like to have conversations about where we are, what's happened since 2016, because there's been a lot of change in personnel both here at DSL and in the university staff.
You mean University of Oregon, not Oregon State?
No, Oregon State.
Okay, all right.
So I'm going to get to U of
Got
O.
it, okay,
So
all right.
Oregon State's extension program has done some work around this, the things that we do at South SLU. So they are somewhat interested, but I don't think they have a financial interest. We reached out to the University of Oregon, began those discussions early on. We had meetings on September 25th where Bree shared an overview of the reserve with the U of O Strategic Planning Committee. And on October 4th, Bree and I and our good counsel, Matt DeVore, met with Kaz Mosley, the U of O Associate Vice President for Research, and Libby Batlin, one of their Vice President for State and Community Affairs, and we identified some issues that we needed more information about before moving forward. On November 26th, there was yet another meeting between Bree and the University of Oregon. On January 4, the reserve staff, after reviewing the items with me, provided information to the U of O that they were asking, existing partnerships and agreements, a summary of how the reserve collaborates with tribes, a detailed valuation of reserve assets and deferred maintenance, and a summary of regular land management challenges and public use issues. So that is now sitting with the U of O, and they're examining that. The South SLU Reserve Management Commission on November 29 at the 152nd meeting of the South SLU Management Commission, I provided an update to the commission members. They had many questions and concerns, primarily centered around the need for a stable and sustainable funding source to support the reserve and its mission, the commission's role in the decision-making process for the future of the reserve, what will happen to the commission if the reserve is transferred to a university. We worked with our council to answer those questions, and one of the questions was answered pretty immediately, that given that the commission was established by the legislature, it can only be dissolved by the legislature, and so there will be legislative action if there is any movement to transfer ownership. We also have begun the outreach with local tribes. On October 12, I requested consultation with the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, with the Coquel Indian Tribe, and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. They have all returned information back to me saying, yes, we'd like to have a conversation. The only tribe that we have had an actual conversation with, though, with the tribal council, was the Coquel on November 29th. And on January 14th, the Coquel sent a letter that is your Appendix A, entreating the governor and DSL to keep the reserve within DSL and funded through the Common School Fund. You will see their letter here of January 10. They talk about two issues that we raised with the tribal council that day, among some other issues. One of them I'll talk about in a moment, but they do indicate that they do not want the management altered of the South SLU, that yes, look for alternative funding, but please don't alter the management. It affords to the Coquel Tribal Council, they felt that the SNR provides them protections of the state, including government-to-government relationship between state and tribes, and it's a significant part of their traditional cultural landscape. And Bree will be the first to tell you that much of the work that they do at the South SLU is always run by the tribes to ensure that they have no concerns about any area that they might be working in. Governor, did you have a question about that?
I'm just going to ask if there are any tribal members on the management commission.
There is, currently that seat is held by Chief Brainerd from the Confederated Coos Tribes. That seat alternates every 4 years. The Coquel tribe held that seat once before. And then we also, when I came on, I said, well, what about the Siletz? Because they're a coastal tribe with interest, and the Siletz had never served in the historical records that we could find, so we are anticipating that the Siletz will take the next tribal turn at that seat. There you have where we are. We've met with other reserve stakeholders. We've had multiple meetings with stakeholders, both Bree and I. We reached out to Bob Bailey, the former director of the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, and actually the father of former Representative Bailey, and I did not know that, Jules Bailey. He sent me a note saying his son said hello, and I said, "You're Jules' father? Oh, that's so cool." So another history lesson. We reached out to Louise Soliday, Peggy Lynch, Natural Resources Coordinator at the Oregon League of Women Voters, who indicated local members are heavily vested in the reserve. Jamie Faraday, a former South Slough Reserve Management Commissioner who served for 2 terms on the commission, and a retired middle school teacher, and also Mike Graybill, the former reserve manager. Both Bree and I have had conversations with Mike. A common theme for all of these folks was stable and sustainable funding. Additional stakeholder comments are concerned about the importance of the land management. And it was also noted, and I didn't know this either, that the legislation that was passed in the 1980s designated the South Slough Reserve as constitutional lands, thereby allowing DSL to use constitutional revenue to fund the reserve. So that's the nexus there. We have upcoming meetings with the tribes, and we have also, as I mentioned, we'll be meeting with OSU, Oregon State administrators, and follow-ups with University of Oregon. So that's the work that we have done. I have not sat still, and I'm working hard to bring you more information, and I'll continue to update you as we get more information. And I wanted to bring one other thing to your attention if you didn't have any questions about that.
Any questions? I think we're good.
Okay, the other issue that the Coquel tribe raised in their letter is that the Winchester Creek spawning habitat for coho salmon and Pacific lamprey in the South Slough watershed. I've been working with Bree, and Bree's done the multiple legwork on that, though I've had conversations with Commissioner John Sweet. We have been looking at a possible land trade with Coos County, and the reason we've been looking at that, and it will come before you as we get further along in those conversations. Winchester Creek is the only salmon spawning creek in the watershed. It is a small 1 mile section of creek, 3/4 of a mile. And it is approximately 2 miles south of the South Slough Reserve. The county owns forest land nearby, and they've been appropriately cutting it and following guidelines. But we are finding that the spawning reach has been impacted. Without doing significant research, the researchers at the reserve have determined that it's likely been caused by the timber harvest. So we reached out to the county and said, would you be interested in some of our land in trade, and then the value we would take and set aside greater area along the creek. The reason I think that this is a doable proposition is because these lands that we manage are stewardship lands, and they're primarily to ensure the protection of scenic, natural resource, cultural, educational, and recreational values. we do not have those lands for harvest purposes. So we would never harvest those lands. So we're thinking that we can make this trade with the county. They can harvest lands and bring income into the county, but we can protect that spawning reach. This is where the biologist comes in here. Bree Yednock combines her work with her management skills, and those conversations are still ongoing, and they're not quite ready to bring forward to you, but I just wanted you to know that they were occurring.
Great.
And if you have questions, Bree can answer them. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of item 8, and I don't want Bree to go anywhere because item 9 is other. And under other, I have some things that we're going to talk about today. I have 4 items. One is a staff recognition. The second item will be the OOST membership. The third item will be an update on Stevens Road, and the fourth item will be an update on Jordan Cove, the removal fill permit, and the work that we just finished up. So first off, I have 2 staff awards to present. One, unfortunately, she is not able to be here today because I think Jordan Cove wore her out, all those hearings and planning, but Ann Friend is on our staff, and is support for our deputies and for me and Aaron and all of us here. We wanted to provide Ann with a certificate in recognition of her outstanding work planning, coordinating, and implementing the public hearings for the Jordan Cove LNG removal fill application, and I know she's watching at home. So Ann, this is your certificate, and next time the land board meets, we'll get a picture with the land board and you. But I have to tell you, without Ann, this would not have happened as smoothly. We had 8 people that went on this trip, and including myself, and we will talk about that and recognize those folks later. But we held 5 public hearings in separate counties in 8 days. Each hearing was attended by hundreds and sometimes thousands of citizens, and led the planning and logistics for the hearing venues and the security, as well as travel for all 8 of us, including accommodations, vehicles, schedules, materials, where we were going to go eat, and where we're going to go to decompress afterwards. The hearings were successful. The department received multiple kudos, and this success could not have happened without Ann's smarts and her tireless efforts. So this is, thank you all for signing this, and I appreciate it. The other staff award goes to the person sitting next to me, and I don't know that she's aware of this, but Bree, and we're going to get a picture with the land board. This is in recognition of your leadership of the South Slough National Estuarine Reserve and your tremendous efforts in following through on the land board's request to identify alternative management and/or funding options. As you have heard the last 20 minutes, this woman is brilliant. She's a highly trained scientist and an excellent manager, and she is my sidekick in helping me meet the goals of the land board, and I just truly appreciate her leadership, and I wanted to recognize that. So you are here, we're going to applaud, you're going to get your picture taken, and then I'll move on in the agenda. All right, come forward, please.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you.
I really want to thank you, Governor, and members of the Land Board, for allowing me to present these awards to my staff. We do internal awards as well, but sometimes it rises to the level of recognition by the land board, and I totally appreciate it.
Director Walker, if I can
Yes.
get you to move the Jordan Cove item up, that would be, since we're hoping to make somewhat of a seamless transition to that topic, and I wanted to let folks in the audience know we've got a handful of people that have signed up that I assume want to talk about Jordan Cove, and I'd like to give them a heads up that the public testimony on this issue closed this week, and we're not going to be taking any public testimony at this time. At least speaking for myself, I'm more than happy to hear from folks via email or letter, and my staff, Jason Miner, will stay after the hearing today to talk to any folks that want to provide information to us, but we're not going to be taking any testimony today from the public regarding the Jordan Cove and the permits.
Okay, great. Well, I will give you my report then. Thank you, Governor. As you mentioned, we have closed the public comment and review period for this removal fill application. That comment period ended on Sunday at 5 p.m. Those who continue to send emails are getting a reply that the comment period has closed. As I mentioned, we held 5 public hearings around the state. Not only did people come to give their comments to us, to me personally, I sat at the table with Ann. Ann was recording everything. And those hearings are on our website now, so if anyone wants to listen to those hours of testimony, they're free to do so at their leisure. But it was important to me because this is such a significantly controversial project for many, that I, as the director, the person who was signing any kind of permit application as to whether it is going forward or not, I needed to hear that testimony. They were challenging hearings because so many people came, but we could only allow 2 minutes per testimony, and sometimes we had disruptions that interrupted that time period. But I had a pretty iron fist with regard to that. I had no patience for people who violated the rules, and the rules were widely distributed beforehand. No shouting, no clapping, no waving things, no signs. Because to me, having spent 10 years in the legislature, and all of you spent time in the legislature as well, people spend time on their testimony, and they're nervous as heck. And they come up to testify, and when people behind them make noise or do things that interrupt the flow of their testimony, that's not a good thing, and it's rude. So we didn't allow that to happen, and those people who did engage in that behavior were asked to leave. We heard from children, we heard from landowners, elected officials. I can tell you that probably the youngest we heard from was 8, and the oldest was 93. So it was a wide range of folks. Every comment has been and will be read. People submitted comments at the hearings, written comments in addition to that. We provided them an opportunity to do that. They submitted questions. We developed questions as people were testifying. Those questions will be answered and posted on our website. We've got a lot of work to do, so people, I'm hoping, are patient with the work that we're doing. The next step is for us to do the technical review, and that's the important work of reviewing and considering all the comments. The department identifies issues that are relevant to the removal fill law, and we will ask the applicant to address those issues along with any other unresolved technical issues identified by the department. All those comments are provided to the applicant, and the applicant is asked to respond, and they respond not only to us, but to the person who has raised the issue. So there's a lot of work to do for Jordan Cove as well. Issues will be addressed in written response. Then, once the department receives those responses back from the applicant, we will make our permit decision. We look at the entire application record. We evaluate it against criteria for issuing a permit, and there are 9 factors involved in that. And we look at the entire record. The expectations of the department's decision-making are laid out in Oregon law, and also when you hired me. You hired me to observe the rules and regulations and the laws of this state, and I plan to do so. We have 2 determinations to make with the 9 criteria. The project is consistent with the protection, conservation, and best uses of the water resources, and 2, the project does not unreasonably interfere with preservation of waters for navigation, fishing, or public recreation. So the timeline set out for us to do that is set in law. We have 120 days from the day an application is received to make a decision. That puts our deadline for this application at March 5th. We will not meet that deadline because we will be asking the applicant for an extension. And I already informed the applicant months ago that we would be asking for an extension because of the volume. We received tens of thousands of comments. And in the last week, my email was exploding. In fact, on Sunday night, when I got back from a short jaunt to the coast, I got to my apartment and turned on my computer. It took about 45 minutes for all those comments to bounce into the proper location for review before I could even get on my computer to work.
And just to clarify for the record, the comment period ended February 3rd, Sunday at 5 p.m. Is that
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so due to the volume of comments, we'll be asking for an extension for our review to thoroughly review those comments, and then we will provide direction to Jordan Cove as to what is needed to be answered. When the entire application record is before me, I'll evaluate the record and make a decision, and when that day comes, I'll rely on the removal fill law. We are anticipating that whether the permit is approved or denied, that any decision will be appealed, and Oregon law offers paths for the department's decision to be examined further. We find it unlikely that there will be any additional comment period unless there is something so substantial we did not foresee. There will be no further public comment. And I will also, just for the audience sake, let them know the federal government also cites LNG terminals, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is the lead agency for the proposed Jordan Cove project. They are expected to hear this application later this year, and multiple state agencies have regulatory roles as well. And they all have their comment periods and their application periods as well. We have also easements that the applicant will be applying for, but the applicant understood that they should probably not apply for the easements until they see how the removal fill permit goes, because if that is not granted, there is no need to apply for easements.
I'm going to stop you there
And
and
I'm
see
done.
if board members have any questions, and then we need to move on to other items because I believe we've got a few folks that want to testify on another issue. I will say, I have to say, that the department did an extraordinary job in these hearings. I know they were extremely stressful for the staff members. Everybody stayed calm, cool, and collected. I think it was a really amazing opportunity for Oregonians to have their voices be heard. And as you said, there were hundreds, probably thousands of people that showed up. Law enforcement, our Oregon State Troopers, our local sheriffs, and I believe there was some security forces from our sovereign tribal nations as well that assisted, and they also did an amazing job, and we really appreciate their support. They don't often get the recognition that they deserve, but we really appreciate their support in making sure that everyone can be safe, and appreciate their time and energy. So Thank you.
And thank you, Governor, and thank you from my staff, from the bottom of our hearts, and we will be having our thank you letters going out to all of those folks, and in particular, I was very pleased with law enforcement support. Excuse me. I'll move on to item number 2. As you know, the Oregon Ocean Science Trust is supported here at the Department of State Lands, and Louise Soliday was the director, the executive director. Louise sent a letter to me and to all of you on January 21, tendering her resignation immediately. She believes that the work that OOST is charged with doing is important for the state to carry out if it is serious about understanding and dealing with the effects of climate change, but she is frustrated by the funding and the lack thereof, and as a result doesn't feel that OOST can carry out its legally mandated duties. I do not know yet what will happen with the rest of the OOST. I emailed Louise last night, and she said she doesn't know what's going to happen. When we advertised to fill the other vacancy, we got 3 letters of interest. She's not sure if anyone's interested in taking over and anticipates there might be further vacancies, but I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. I just want to say Director Soliday did a terrific job leading this agency. We really appreciate her leadership on the OOST. I think this is a shout out to the legislature. You're in session now. You have the ability to fund and provide the resources needed to keep this work moving forward. And by not funding it, you are making a very conscientious decision to bring this work to a halt, and I think that would be unfortunate. So.
Yes, and Senator Roblin has introduced legislation to fund it once again, so we'll see if he's successful. All right, my final item is an update on the Stevens Road tract in Bend, and Governor, I want to thank you for pulling together Department of Administrative Services and your staff yesterday for us to have a conversation about the procurement that was kind of hung up. The Department of Administrative Services had decided to do a new procurement process for land transactions involving brokers, and that was taking far longer than they or us anticipated. We came to an agreement yesterday in that meeting that they would complete their work on their procurement by the end of March, and therefore we can jumpstart our work again on Stevens Road. In the meantime, we were not letting that stop us from doing our work. We have good qualified staff who have been involved with the City of Bend. Deputy Director Bill Ryan and I went over to Bend on January 18th on a snowy Friday and met with their staff to talk about that particular property, what we all need to do to keep that moving forward, and how it fits in with the other properties we're dealing with. Right now, we have this huge South Redmond tract annexation that is busy, and so we wanted to just align our priorities. Bend is in a housing crisis, and we want to do everything we can.
My understanding is that this particular tract has the potential to have 1,000 homes on it.
Yes, Governor, I think that is a good depiction of what this tract can do. 220 acres of this tract are already in the urban growth boundary, and we have a lot of work to do. The exciting part about that meeting with the City of Bend is that they are eager to partner. And so they are willing to assist us on doing some things that we do not have the capacity to do right now. The city manager and one of the city councilors who was in that meeting is taking this information back to the city council, and they'll decide how much they can do from their end to partner with us, and we're going to keep this project moving because affordable housing is important to the department as well, and I know it is very important to you and the board.
my conversations with my team, clearly folks are on high alert to get this done as quickly as possible through the Department of Administrative Services, and I appreciate their immediate attention. So hopefully we can get this taken care of quickly. So thank you.
You're welcome. And that concludes all of my report today. So I'll step back for you to take testimony unless there are any questions.
Any questions? I think you're off the hook right now. Thank you very much again. Thank you for your leadership and your extraordinary work in handling the remove and fill permit hearings. So I would like to bring up, we've got, it looks like a handful of folks who want to give us a little information on the Tierra Del Mar project. I'd ask that you limit your comments to about 2 minutes. Please don't repeat what other people are saying, and love to have Jean Cho, Lene Rutledge, and Mary Voberg come on up. Oh, good, thank you. Good morning and welcome. Please state your name for the record.
I'm Mary Voberl. I live in Tierra Del Mar, Irish Avenue.
I'm Lene Rutledge, and I'm a property owner in Tierra Del Mar.
Great.
I'm Jean Cho, and I'm a resident of Tierra Del Mar.
Thank you. What would you like us to know today?
Jean?
I have a letter, and I appreciate you guys listening. I'll try to go through it quickly. But this is regarding Facebook's submarine cable project going through Tierra Del Mar. So, in the midst of the 1930s Great Depression, a single mother named Marie Pollock founded the community of Tierra Del Mar. From an office in Portland, she sold lots for $25 with a required...
Those were the good old days, right?
Yeah, with required monthly payments of only $1 a month. So it was quite a success story. Despite the passing of decades, the scenic beauty and the ethos of Tierra Del Mar remains remarkably unchanged. Thanks to Bob Straub, Tom McCall, Jim Spring, Linda Steiner, and countless others. Today, Tierra Del Mar sits on a half-mile stretch of coastline and consists of over 220 single-family homes and no commercial developments. Tierra Del Mar is the only coastline development in the 8-mile stretch between Cape Kiwanda and Cape Lookout State Parks. Netarts Bay Spit extends to the north another 7 miles of protected, undeveloped coastline. Within these boundaries sits Oregon's newest park, Sitka's Edge Natural Area, as well as Claymire's Natural Area and the Siuslaw National Forest. So in such a setting, we're shocked by Facebook's plan to conduct this 6-month industrial-scale drilling project. The single-family residential lot that they purchased is only 120 feet wide and is directly adjacent to 5 existing homes and dozens in close proximity. Health, safety, and environmental hazards should be carefully studied. Making things worse, the likelihood of future projects returning to this same property or elsewhere in Tierra Del Mar is very high. Similarly, the beach manhole in Pacific City, 3 miles away, was drilled in 2011, 2016, and 2017. The Facebook project may have initially been targeted as the 4th drilling at the same Pacific City location. Furthermore, all these concerns were magnified by problems of lost notifications to adjoining landowners and last week's start of road construction without a single public hearing or any state permits. This was definitely not a great example of public involvement. So stepping back from that, broadly speaking, our community's concerns can be organized around 3 themes. 1, environmental concerns. In terms of the environment, we argue that Tierra Del Mar is the worst place on the Oregon coast for Facebook's drilling project. Adjoining Tierra Del Mar is Sand Lake Estuary. Sand Lake is the most pristine, intact estuary in Oregon, according to the Watershed Council. It is the largest of Oregon's 5 remaining estuaries. Sand Lake is the rarest and most precious natural resource of its class in Oregon's portfolio. Cumulative environmental damage from drilling and seabed disturbance is not well understood. Little research has been done on the release, AKA frack out, of drilling fluids into the ocean. Unfortunately, we Oregonians are faced with new marine problems not seen one generation before. Domoic acid in crabs, paralytic shellfish poisoning in mussels, ocean acidification and hypoxia, starfish die-off now. Solving these complex problems requires more than our best science and technology. Intact ecosystems created over millions of years of natural selection are needed as living laboratories for discovering solutions. The area between the capes surrounding Tierra del Mar is just such a place. We must not take a precautionary approach to decisions about marine resources and uses when information is limited, per Oregon statewide Planning Goal 19. Number 2, safety concerns. In terms of safety, we argue that Tierra del Mar is among the worst places on the Oregon coast for Facebook's drilling project. The infrastructure, as well as the charm of Tierra del Mar, is stuck in time. There are no fire hydrants, no sewers, no cell phone service. A great place.
No cell phone service?
No.
Oh, we're all moving there.
A great place to get away, but not such a great place during emergency events involving fire, ambulance, tsunami, or frack out. The water for the community emanates from a nearby trickling hillside creek. The reservoir tank contains a maximum of 30,000 gallons in the winter, but is run dry some summers. The Facebook drilling plan calls for using water obtained from a non-existent community fire hydrant. The nearest fire hydrant is actually 1.1 miles away.
Gene, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up. I've let you go on way longer, and I've gotten assist from my right to help with timekeeping, and we're happy to take your letter.
I'm almost there.
Okay.
I'll go fast.
Thanks. Thank you.
In addition, the sole access to Tierra del Mar is a 2-lane Sand Lake road. As we found out last week during Facebook's road construction, Sand Lake became a 1-lane road. The resultant choke point impacts locals and tourists who wish to drive between 4 popular state parks. The vast equipment, diesel, water, drilling chemicals, seabed removal, and waste logistics are problematic here. For older residents in Tierra del Mar, the drivable escape route southward to Cape Wanda is the only way to tsunami high ground. Therefore, the southern end location of the drilling property potentially blocks evacuation for most of the community. The same path should be geologically evaluated for impacts of high tonnage transport. In 1999, the area of this area around Sand Lake Road spectacularly collapsed and was closed for 9 months. Finally, number 3, probably the biggest. Of the first 2 themes, environmental and safety concerns, they're potential risks. The third theme regards the impacts on livability and unjust financial loss will undeniably occur. When purchasing a home, we rely on zoning to protect our investment. We feel safe when purchasing property that is surrounded by existing homes and is zoned for single-family residences throughout the neighborhood. We could have never imagined lengthy industrial operations being callously allowed next to residences. For this type of project, the threats to health and sanity become obvious for those living by. As a community, we're most worried about our newest and youngest full-time resident, a 1-year-old who lives a few lots away. For those who purchase the home for future retirement, we worry about the loss of rental income to pay the mortgage. Even scarier are changing life circumstances, relocation, job loss, family death, incapacitation, all of which may force us to sell our home. Can you imagine filling out the real estate seller's disclosure form as a nearby neighbor, listing a 6-month industrial scale project, possible structural damage, possible toxic exposure?
Okay, I'm going to cut you off and turn over to the next speaker. Thank you.
All right, Governor Brown and members of the board, thank you for listening to us. My home is 4 lots away from ground zero for this drilling project. I'm very concerned about the violent shaking that's going to occur. Just this morning, I heard you all talking about due diligence and about the climate change threats to infrastructure, about operating in darkness. That's our situation now. If there's been any due diligence done by the Facebook subsidiary, we're not aware of it. If they've done any, they're not sharing it with us. This means, what's going to happen to our infrastructure? What about our 60-year-old water lines? What about our home foundations and our septic systems? We're all on septic tanks, some above ground, some underground, and drain fields. Some of the drain fields are right on the ocean front, including the one next door to me on the south, 3 lots away from Ground Zero. If these fail, we could have sewage, raw sewage on the beaches. Think about that. What will that do for Oregon's image? What about the soil? Our homes are built on sand. What is the violent shaking going to do to the sand under our homes? Or our floors going to tilt? What's going to happen there? What about toxic dust? There's references to protecting the workers from toxic dust. What about those of us downwind? Are we going to be breathing toxic dust without any kind of protection? Another thing is the propane tanks. Some are literally feet away from Ground Zero. If these rupture because of the violent shaking, if these fall over and cause a fire, the fire could sweep through the entire community and into, as Sitka said, the new port. It's good you guys are protecting marine organisms and the fisheries and so on, but we need protection too. We need these people to do their due diligence, do these studies that are going to affect our properties and the environment. So thank you very much, but we're in harm's way right now. Please help us and come see the lot. See how small it is, and how inappropriate it is, how close single-family homes are next door to the
Thank you. I'm smiling because I think we would have liked to have invested in 1930 when the community was formed. Lene.
Hello, Governor. It's been a while.
I know. It's good to see you.
And nice to see you, too. I'd like to recognize the people that are in the 2 rows immediately to my left. These are people, along with us, who traveled from Tierra del Mar to come and be a part of this public comment. So I would just like to give a shout out to them. For the record, my name is Lene Rutledge, and I live here in Salem. My husband and I also own a home in Tierra del Mar that we've owned since 1991. And it's a rural residential community in which Facebook, doing business as Edge Cable, has said that they're going to do a commercial drilling, and it's going to impact us. And you've heard from the other speakers about what we see as some of the impact. The Department of State Lands has 3 pending applications, and we've been submitting public comment to those 3 applications. And what we ask of you is that we are provided with a public information hearing and meetings as described in the Oregon Administrative Rule. In preparing their applications, Facebook, as the applicant, did due diligence, and they met with selected ocean users and with industries. But they neglected to meet with us, the people that are going to be directly impacted. And we have asked through this process, and we'll be asking formally of the Department of State Lands, to create a mechanism for us to have that Facebook interaction. We have legitimate concerns. You've heard about it from the other speakers. We don't know what equipment is going to be used. We don't know what the decibel level is going to be. We don't know what kind of studies have been done to mitigate the issues that we believe are going to happen. And we want the opportunity to have that interaction. You heard that we don't have cell phone service. So what happens when they have a problem or an issue and they need to contact someone? They're not going to be able to do it. You have to literally leave from Tierra del Mar, go up and over the hill, or wait for low tide and go out into the ocean to be able to get a signal. This is the reality with which we enjoy why we live in this residential area. So you have a constitutional responsibility to manage the lands and to obtain the greatest benefit for the people of Oregon. We don't believe that's happening. We think we can and we should do better than what these applications have shown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call up, if they still want to testify, Candace Churchley and Steve Chambers. You don't need to if you don't want to, but you're welcome to. Come on up. And I'm hoping these public hearings don't cause a, total a land grab in Tierra Del Mar because there's no cell phone service.
That's wonderful. Good morning. I guess it's still morning. I'm Candace Churchley, and I live in Tierra Del Mar. I have for 16 years, and yes, no cell service is wonderful. I live about 150 feet north of the proposed drilling site, and didn't find out anything about it until about not even a month ago. And they happened to post a sign on the beach. I'm lucky enough, every single day, twice a day, I walk my dogs on the beach, and that's where I saw the sign. Until then, knew nothing. I also pick up, the reason I mention that.
Thank you.
Yeah, is environmental issues are a big concern for me. And part of it is my lack of knowledge because we're not being informed. One is I've tried to do some research and reading to see what the equipment will be used. We don't know for sure. I know it takes sand, high pressure water, who knows where that's coming from, not from us, and some kind of chemical. I don't know what the impact is going to be in the ocean or on the ocean with the chemical. Also the sludge coming back, because where's that going to go? And are they going to vacuum it up? Because the tide, I have seen the tide, the water come over the land that they're going to be using on high tides. And then we're talking about rising sea levels. That's a concern. And the last is the toxic dust. They, in the permits, said they have it all planned out for their employees, what to do with the toxic dust. How about us? I'd like to have a day where there's no wind at the beach. That doesn't happen very often, so that dust is going somewhere, plus the ocean. So that has to be impacting the environmental issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor Brown and Board. My name is Steve Chambers. I reside here in Salem with my wife. We purchased a house over 45 years ago in Tierra Del Mar for $13,000. Not anymore.
You were quite prescient. That was very good.
The reason we did was because it was a quiet, non-commercial, residential coastal community with one of the longest pristine beaches in the state. This project violates each of the reasons that we chose to purchase our vacation home. During drilling, it will not be quiet. It will be a commercial project, and it will go against the residential nature of the community and the will of the residents. We agree with what has previously been stated by residents and property owners here. One of our biggest concerns is the complete lack of interaction by Facebook and its shell company with the Tierra Del Mar community prior to purchase, and as it seeks approval from various entities that need to sign off. This end run with the intent of facing us with a fait accompli is reprehensible. We join with the near unanimous opposition of this community, this project in our residential community. Should also add that Tierra Del Mar does abut the Sitka Sedge Park. And where the drilling will take place is approximately 2 miles from one of the snowy plover protected areas. We have no idea what the impact of the drilling will be on that. So certainly we ask for your consideration on this. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate everybody's time and energy and traveling. You didn't have to travel very far, obviously, but everybody else did. We appreciate your time and energy, and I know that all of the land board members will be taking a look at this issue, and the director has been here throughout this testimony, and I know she would be concerned as well. So thank you very much. Thank you. Anything else? Director Walker, do you want to come up and let us know next steps?
Yes, Governor, I do. I appreciate hearing all these comments today, and I will tell you the first next step is that I have the authority to have a public hearing, and because that was requested here, I will do that. I will engage the county to come in at that public hearing because some of these activities are not related to the permit before us. They're things that the county is doing. So we'll see if we can get a joint public hearing date set. I will tell you that currently the project is both a removal fill permit application and 2 easement applications. The removal fill application involves landing the fiber optic cable on the shore near Cloverdale and running it to the existing cable landing station in Pacific City. And I'm sitting in the sinking chair again. I want this chair to disappear from my life. Okay, so
I'll take that chair.
And we're gonna provide that chair as an honorary token of our affection for the treasurer, who happens to be how tall? 6'7". So
there you go. That's perfect. That permit was received on November 9 and approved by DSL, but because the applicant did not notify all the landowners, the adjacent landowners, we got an incomplete list. We made them go back out and provide us with a complete list, and now that public comment period is open until February 21 for both the removal fill and the 2 easement applications. The easements are permanent easements, and those do require land board approval. The removal fill application does not. This one easement is for an ultra-high-speed fiber optic cable system between the U.S. and Asia, landing in Cloverdale, also Pacific City, and one for a vacant bore in the same area that would provide an additional large capacity link to the Pacific Rim. That comment period will run till February 21 as well. I'm not sure we'll be able to get a public hearing scheduled between now and February 21, so we will hold that comment period open until that public hearing is held. And we will discuss the fracking issue that folks have talked about. Generally speaking, fracking is a technique that allows drilling companies to extract hard-to-get resources and occurs after drilling. This project has a possibility of something called frack out, but that is not the same as fracking. So I think if we have the public hearing, we get the applicant there to explain just what the heck this project is, we could have a lot of these questions answered. And I know that my staff went out recently to talk to homeowners, but it is just not enough. So we will make sure we hold that public hearing and report back.
fabulous. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Seeing or hearing no further business to come before the Land Board, before I adjourn, I just want to say we are thinking of Secretary Richardson and hoping that he is getting access to the health care that he needs, and we just hope he gets what he needs to recover, and we wish him a speedy recovery. So with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.